Too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. Too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. And something that's a good thing that can sometimes be a bad thing. Not because it's a bad thing in and of itself, but because of the fact that it's too much of a good thing. There's also the burden of having too much opportunity. And it might sound like a weird thing to say, right? How can there be like too much opportunity? But I was having a conversation with someone recently, maybe to illustrate the point. And we're talking about how, imagine a situation where someone has, let's say they have 4 or 5 taps that they're trying to close. And in these taps, there's water flowing out of all of them, right? Maybe there's a leak out of each of those taps. And with their 2 hands, the person might try to close the leaks on all of those taps. But because of the fact that they're limited in their capacity to close all those taps, right? They only have 2 hands. They'll fail at closing the taps all at once. So he might hold this tap, he might hold that tap. But as long as he has 2 hands and there are more taps than he has hands, he'll never be able to, meet the task of closing those taps. It's the problem of having, too much to do with 2 little hands. If you think in that analogy of water being, the time it's flowing out, and those taps being, opportunity, it would make sense for the person to focus on the one tap, try to get it, to stop leaking, and only once he's done then to go back to the other taps and then try to attend to those one by one. I think that probably summarizes the whole video that we're gonna do. But let me explain why that thought struck me. When you are a person who realizes that it's better to be a person who gives value than merely tries to take value, you will realize that there's so much opportunity around to give value. If you become a person who just focuses on how much value can I give to the world around me, your eyes will open up to the reality of the fact that there is an abundance of opportunity for places to give value. Whether it's with your knowledge, with your skill, with your ability, with your experiences, with your network and connections, etc. When you become a person who focuses on giving value more than merely extracting, your eyes will open up to the reality that there's so much value to give. There's a lot of value to give, right? There's a lot of opportunity to give, rather. There's a lot of people who could benefit from any value you have to give. That's because it's more blessed to give than to receive. The world is more open to the reality of giving value, basically the opportunity opens up to a person who's open to the reality that they can give value. But sometimes those opportunities, when you're awake to them, when you perceive them, you'll realize that there's actually a lot, right? There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of value that can be given. But sometimes the opportunity is greater than one's capacity to give the value. Too many taps, right? And the problem with that comes from when you realize that all of these opportunities actually could be lucrative, could be beneficial, could be high value, could be really fruitful in the long term and could be really beneficial to the people you want to give value for, right? Whether it's in the area of ministry, whether it's in the area of work or supplying something or whatever, etc., etc., etc. There's an abundance of opportunity. But sometimes that opportunity can be greater than your capacity to meet that opportunity. And that can be a burden because you can feel like, I can't meet all of these opportunities to give value. So I must not be, adequate. I must not have the capacity. I must not be good enough. Without realizing that you are finite as a human being, And that can genuinely be a burden because I wish I could attend to all of these things. I wish I could do all of these things at once. Because sometimes there are things which only you can do, or which are things which only you can see. And so the burden is when will I get a chance to attend to all of these things because you really want to cover them or you really want to attend to them. And that can truly be a burden. It's the burden of having too much opportunity, where you can give value. And so the question then becomes, how do you then deal with that, right? How do you handle the burden of having too much opportunity? I might not have an answer right now, a perfect answer, but I'll tell you how I'm puzzling through the thought. It's 2 things, maybe when I think about puzzling through the thought, because it's a challenge that I think I'm facing with feeling like you've got so much opportunity of value where you can give and feel like you don't have enough resources of time, of ability, of capacity to give all of it. Being finite. And the two ways that I'm puzzling through now of a way to deal with that, firstly is in the area of sequencing, right? And second is in the area of prioritizing. Prioritizing and sequencing. By prioritizing, or maybe let me start with sequencing. Sequencing is simply the idea of doing one thing after the other, right? You know, when God created the world, on the first day he created the light. On the second day, divided the light from the darkness, and then, created the firmament. On the fourth day, third day, etc., etc., etc. But that's sequencing, right? He created one thing after the other because he couldn't, or he could, but he didn't create all things at the same time. And I think there's a lesson in that the God who could have created the entire universe all at once still saw it fit to do it one day at a time. And there's a lesson there on sequencing, that sometimes even if you are the most capable person to do all of those things, you won't do them all at once, because of the fact that the sequencing, one thing has to come after the other. And sometimes even if these things are disconnected, right? Even if it might not necessarily be that these things are necessarily connected, it might be diverse areas of value, giving one value after the other, sequencing. The second is prioritizing. Prioritizing is in the area of realizing, okay, of all the things I have to give, which one is most important? And there's a project planning diagram or matrix that focuses on doing what is most urgent and what is most important, right? On focusing on what's most urgent and what's most important, that's a key that helps with prioritizing, to say that whatever is most urgent and whatever is most important, of all the various things that you have to attend to, work on that right now. Now, the criteria of what's most important can vary depending on what it is you're working on and what the opportunity is. But ultimately, that's the principle, to say what is the most important thing of all the valuable things that I could be doing right now, that I want to be doing right now. Of all of them, what is the most important? And that becomes a framework that can be useful to attending to all of those things. Say, okay, there are various things, look, I would love to work on. I'd love to attend to them all at once. And I'd love to give value in these areas. But right now, I just don't have the capacity. Right? What is the most urgent and what is the most important? And whichever one is the most urgent and important, to then work on that. And then to know that sequencing is one after the other. And the sequencing doesn't necessarily have to take long as I think about it. It doesn't necessarily have to take long periods of time, but just to say, okay, if I dedicate 6 months, a year, 3 months, whatever, to making sure that I just focus on this one aspect and make sure I give it my utmost best, to the blinding of my eyes to every other thing that serves as a distraction, because opportunity can be a distraction. So then work on that. Sometimes opportunity can be a distraction, sometimes even the areas of giving value can be a distraction. So sequencing and prioritizing at the moment, as I puzzle through the thought, seems to be the most viable way to try and deal with the burden of having too much opportunity to handle at the time. The difficulty with that, and this is where I'm sure the discipline comes from, the difficulty in that is in silencing the burning urge to want to attend to all the other various aspects of value, right? Because there will be a burning urge to say, I'm working on X, but I know I could give so much value in the area of B and C and D. And there's a serious level of discipline that comes with shutting one's ears to the opportunity that exists in various areas of life. And I'm praying that God helps me with that type of discipline, because there's nothing as painful as seeing, on top of the pain of seeing a lot of opportunities that you couldn't attend to, is the pain of seeing opportunities that you didn't complete because you were trying to do everything at once, right? There's a saying that if you juggle too many balls, you end up dropping some. And I think that's a greater burden or regret to have, to say that, I tried to work on A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and as a result, none of them are finished. Rather than to say, I'm going to work on A and give it my utmost best and give it my fullest all until it's finished, and then move on to the next one. Right? Sequencing and prioritizing. The burden of having too much value. Sometimes too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. Sometimes when you're a person of value, right, a person who believes that you can give value in some form or fashion to the world, you'll be overwhelmed by the amount of opportunity that exists in the world to give value. Right? There's an endless window of need that the world has for value that human beings have to give, right? Just in serving your fellow man. And that burden can be a burden of too much opportunity to give. Hope that will be valuable as you puzzle through the thoughts. I hope that it'll be, it's something that I want to try and apply more consistently, so that one can look back in the years ahead and look back and say, I might not have done all the 10 things that I wanted to do, but I know of the 3 things that I did do, I finished them and they're done. They're complete. I can point to them as things that are, complete and done. Rather than, 10 things that you've started but didn't finish. It's rather to have 3 things that you did start and that you did finish. It's that idea that to everything there's a season and a time to every purpose under the heavens. Some things, it might not be their time despite how valuable they may be. Just the thoughts. I hope it will be valuable to someone else. Maybe let me know what your thoughts are if you're finding yourself in a position where you're able to cover a lot of things at the same time, to delegate and multitask, etc., successfully. Maybe drop a thought, but if not, I hope this will be of value to you. Wishing you all the best, and we'll see each other on the other side. Much love.